And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who has zero career ejections from the Breslin Center, but he's working on it. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Hey, doing all right, Kieran. I was at that game actually with my
Oh,
girlfriend, and we were sitting in the upper level. And when Paul Davis got ejected, I had no idea what was going on. There were just a bunch of people yelling, and then some tall guy got up and left. So it wasn't until after the game I found out that was Paul Davis getting ejected. That was crazy.
oh man, that was a shout. That was a shout out to my childhood, man. I remember that '05 team, '05 team very well. And I think it was probably just an official being upset that he got duped into calling so many fouls that Paul Davis drew back in the day, because the man was a post master back in the day, and also great actor in a Gatorade commercial starring a young Dwayne Wade. So, all right. That was fun. Glad you got to see something pretty unique that everyone was talking about in the day of sports. We're going to talk about things not as interesting, but just as fun, I think, because the Tigers, we are in the year 2026. The roster is starting to take shape a little bit more. I have been getting questions, and I have
The
been questioning
roster's been in
myself.
the same shape pretty much this whole time. Who are we kidding?
Yeah, that's true. But we did at least get a resolution in terms of the Jay Hen situation, because that had
Hmm.
kind of been hanging around. I've been getting a couple DMs like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I mean, I didn't have an answer, and I actually meant to ask you if you had heard anything, and then come to find out that they're, just as is often the case, they're looking for some trade partners, and Jay Hen is going to the Tampa Bay Rays for the the very famous cash consideration. So the era is officially closed on Jay Hen in Detroit. Obviously, he had been DFA'd, I believe, before Christmas, but now the move is official. He is going to be a member of the Tampa Bay Rays for cash considerations, which, you know, I can't say I feel great when the Rays are like, yeah, sure, we'll take a chance on this guy. They you don't have room for on your roster, but that now we have, like I said, a resolution. Cody Jay Hen to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, I'm not surprised he went to a quote unquote smart team. Um, but at least it wasn't the Guardians. At least it wasn't the Royals. At least, you're not going to have to see him on such a regular basis if he were to be able to put things together and get some playing time in Tampa. We'll see. Again, how are the Rays going to value his defense, or will they give him DH at bats? That was the thing. I don't know that it wasn't that it was that the Tigers didn't value him. It was that they just weren't playing him. There wasn't really a spot for him. But the fact he was traded tells you there was some interest from across the league. Now, the fact all they got was a cash consideration rather than, I don't know, maybe some flyer relief pitcher or something tells me maybe it wasn't heated interest, multiple teams trying to trade for him rather than be subjected to waiver order. But for whatever it's worth, there was enough interest that you got a little something in return, a little chunk of change maybe you can use to buy some new fancy equipment or whatever teams do with all the glorious cash considerations they get. I'm wishing Justyn-Henry Malloy the best of luck in Tampa. I do think he's a fun guy, has the potential to be a really good player. Will be super interesting to see what he does next season.
Yeah, and he also, had a nice little post on Instagram, classy, thank you to the city and all that stuff. So that's cool. And not breaking any news here. I don't, or this is not a very unique opinion, but the guy is gonna have moments in the big leagues. He already has had moments, in the big leagues. But now that he's gonna be on, another team or teams, depending on how long he plays, like there are times Josh Harrison was like, beating the Tigers, what I mean, post his time like with the team, and it's like, where did this come from, And so like Jay Hen, gonna be happy for him, but I'm also gonna be a little bitter if he, like, a guy that all of a sudden he gets regular at bats. If this is the case, gets regular at bats and kind of you're able to
Well,
use his
Josh
abilities.
Harrison's on the Foul Territory Network now. He's on Bucko territory. Jay Hen would be great on a podcast someday. Maybe that's why most bummed his time at the Tigers is over because I don't know if he can do a Tigers podcast.
Well, we'll see. Never say never on that. Maybe in year 10 of Tiger territory, we get Jay Hen on. So after a long, illustrious major league career, he decides to join the ranks of podcasting. All right, other news, Cody. The Tigers made a couple moves, but I think the most notable was bringing in right-handed reliever Scott Effross, is how I'm going
Hmm.
to go with that. And that's a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. His major league salary would be a hair under $1 million. So obviously not expensive, but not nothing either. And he does, per Evan Petzel, he does have an option remaining. So this is a guy that I would anticipate Scott Harris, who has they've been a part of the same organization before in Chicago. This is a guy that I would anticipate seeing go up and down a handful of times over the course of the season. So it just feels like perfect. Everything lines up for this guy to make like 5 or 6 like trips up the highway there. So that's my take. If you look at his numbers, some of his metrics, like he's a sideways thrower, and he's pretty good at, in theory, his skill set is that he doesn't allow a lot of hard contact. He doesn't allow like a high barrel rate. Like he is good at limiting damage, but he has obviously not been as consistent. He's 32 years old, I believe, so not as consistent as he was earlier in his career.
I mean, he's been pretty bad since 2022, which was a long time ago. Uh, he had a 5.40 ERA well, he only threw 3 major league innings in 2024. In 2025, he threw 10 major league innings. He kind of got rocked. He's hardly pitched in the major leagues since 2022, and when he has, it has not been good. He does not strike out anyone. But the reason we're talking about this is because it is kind of, I think, important in terms of the way the Tigers are constructing their bullpen. I normally don't pay a lot of attention to minor league deals. I don't write stories off minor league deals. But it's part of the Tigers' philosophy in constructing this bullpen. They got a sidewinding type in Efros, probably as kind of a de facto Chase Lee replacement. The Tigers are intentional in collecting guys with a lot of different looks, because you never know when that might prove useful. They want a bullpen that can kind of keep opponents off guard or have different arms that can attack a wide variety of hitters, or maybe certain pockets of hitters that might struggle with a profile like that. And I think in building this bullpen, look, they've made the major league signings: Kyle Finnegan, Kenley Jansen. A big part of what they're also doing is basically playing the volume game, basically throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping a couple of these guys stick. They've got some other guys in their system, the Bailey Horns, that maybe are something, maybe not. They've signed other guys to minor league deals, bringing back Tyler Madison, Cole Waits, Jack Little, bringing back Sean Gunther. Those are just among some of the guys they've re-upped with this offseason. Tanner Rainey. And that is all very intentional. I think with the intent that several of these guys will end up being the seventh or eighth guy in the bullpen at some point this season, because you can't guarantee health. You can do everything you want in the bullpen, but bullpens are volatile by nature. So I think the Tigers want a ton of options, a ton of different types of options, rather than spending to construct a huge bullpen. The LA Dodgers spent on their bullpen last year, and by the tail end of the regular season, basically had no bullpen. This is kind of the Tigers' counter approach, a little more of an economical approach. It's to get a volume of different arms, and Scott Effross is one of the more notable because he was pretty good for the Yankees in 2021, 2022. I don't know, that I'm optimistic about him returning to that level, but I see why they have brought him into the organization.
Yeah, like the way I look at it in my head, to like summarize it, is I feel like the Tigers pitching department wants to be a long scout. And what I mean by that is like the opposing team, and everybody else has infrastructure. I don't know about everybody else, but most teams have a detailed infrastructure in which they scout, scout, chart, and like have like reports on how to attack these these pitchers. And the Tigers want to have as many pages. It's probably all digital now, but like that notebook, the metaphorical notebook, to be very thick. And then like when you bring in like an Efros in a situation where he just got called up, a Bailey Horn, where he's probably only going to be there for a couple days, and it's gonna create a more imbalanced look than just like, all right, here's Finnegan again, here's Jansen again,
Mhm.
here's Will Vest again. Like the 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 forward way is what you said about having as many bites at the apple, throwing as much stuff at the wall to see what sticks. But the back end of that is that it makes you a longer scout to have on a weekend basis, a midweek basis for guys. And I do believe that's intentional as well. It's like they know that the hitting coordinators and the hitting department, they're going to be very busy. They want those guys to be, or women, to be very busy in preparing for the Tigers for every little situation. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, that's probably part of it. It's interesting because chances are all these dudes, all these names we've just listed off, like, are any of them going to be worth more than like 0.2 WAR next season? The chances are really slim. But pitchers like this at the same time are important. I think AJ Hinch values these guys. These guys probably aren't going to pitch leverage innings. They might not pitch when the team has the lead, but you have to get serviceable performance from the front end of your bullpen, from the sixth, seventh, eighth guy in your bullpen to get through a season, to keep some of those losses close, to keep the Vest, Finnegan, Jansen's fresh and healthy. So it's a weird thing, and I understand why you wouldn't really want to pay for guys like that, but it is important to get production from guys like that. And honestly, that was a part of the Tigers' failings last year. Guys they had high hopes for. I mean, I don't know. Chase Leith actually threw some very good innings, and then when it got ugly, it got ugly. A guy like Tyler Owens, they were pretty high on in spring training. He's no longer even in the system. Some of those guys they were hoping would stick last year, I think, didn't quite stick. Dylan Smith, whose stint in the big leagues was very short and then had an injury. But I think you need a little more stickiness from those types of guys this season if you want to kind of resurrect your pitching staff to being one of the best in the league.
Yeah, well, we spent a handful of minutes there. It's related to Effross, but it's not. It's also not directly related to him. But one of the reasons why we can kind of zero in and kind of philosophize a little bit is that there hasn't been that many moves, and there's also not been that many moves in free agency period. So I did want to spend like a couple minutes on this because this is kind of like a broader baseball topic. It does kind of feel like a slower, maybe a less efficient offseason than we're used to. Again, broadly speaking, all teams, not just the Tigers. And to throw in a familiar name, Alex Bregman, it got reported Monday or Tuesday, that like he basically has the offer that the Tigers offered him last season from the Red Sox now. Like he has reportedly has that on the table, and he's like sitting on it. And to me, if there's not an example of this being a slow offseason, I don't know what is. Like the deal he almost took last year, he's a year older. He's not taking this year, and then there has been nothing. I feel like on Cody Bellinger, haven't really heard a whole lot about Bichette. Haven't I almost said Dante Bo Bichette, and then even Kyle Tucker. Like it just feels like a lot of kind of waiting around. It feels very slow. It feels very slow, and the Bregman piece might be the ultimate example of that.
I mean, yeah, I think it's been slow every year since I've been doing this, with the exception of 2020 when there was a lockout and thus a de facto signing deadline. I'm not optimistic that the next MLB labor deal is going to have some sort of signing deadline because I don't think the union wants it. They fear it'll suppress wages, even though I'm not sure that's the case. But what we're left with is this. I do think it's been more slower, boring, whatever word you want to use, even than last off season. Maybe just because in Tigers land we were all glued on Bregman watch a little closer, but I feel like the amount of big moves has been pretty small. There are some big dominoes still coming, still to fall. The trade market hasn't really been all that exciting. The biggest name on the block is Skubal, and unless something changes, it doesn't sound like he's moving. So we're just left with this. We're sitting here. It's January. It's a weird time in the calendar. And I think agents have learned that there's no need to act if you don't have to. There is no deadline. You can take this thing up to spring training and see if someone else gets desperate, which as a player would drive me crazy. I think I'd be like, just sign me get me signed somewhere so I know where I'm going. But I think agents are advising guys to just wait it out, see what happens, because that finally puts some pressure on teams to get their rosters together before spring training. We're getting closer to some movement with Tucker. Um, Bregman's market, I think we at least have an idea what it is. It's crazy how no one seems to have much of a feel on the Bo Bichette market. And I'll be fascinated to see how that one plays out. Meanwhile, in Tigers land, doesn't seem like they're going to do much of anything of substance. Maybe they could add like another pitcher, or maybe they're just going to be content getting guys on minor league deals. I'm not real sure, but that's where we are. It's certainly not all that exciting right now.
Well, to illustrate what we're talking about, the Athletic has a big board of top 50 free agents. Uh, 6 of the top 9 are unsigned, and 20 of the top 50 are
Wow,
unsigned. So
wow.
there you go. You could literally make a pretty good team based on the unsigned free agents. Oh wait, the Athletic did that too. So if you want to check that out on the Athletic, you can. But all that, Cody, brings us to our not sponsored but contractually obligated Tarik Skubal update. And as is tradition, we have new information that is also old information. This comes courtesy of Buster Only, and I'm very close to direct quoting him here. The expectation within the organization is that Skubal will be in Tigers camp at the onset of spring training. He also said that the Tigers, quote, set a very high price tag for any Tarik Skubal trade talks. So the expectations within the organization is that Skubal will be at Lakeland at the onset of camp. Maybe not the middle, maybe not 3/4, maybe at the end, but at the onset of spring training, Skubal will be in Tigers camp. So there you go. There's our update, Cody. Any thoughts?
No, like I just told you, I don't think he's going unless something changes, which we can leave that door open all day long.
I will say that this is all internet speculation, but yeah, it does seem to have a little bit of smoke to it. Could Tarik Skubal could be the athlete, could be the cover athlete for MLB The Show this
Now,
year.
now that's kind of fun. I've seen the pictures out there. It's interesting, right? It's based on the 26 is orange. We got a blue background on the website. The internet thinks it's got to be either Scooble or someone from the Mets, a Juan Soto, a Lindor. That orange looks a little more like a Tiger's orange to me. So that'll be a fun reveal. That'll be something to follow. I think it'd be awesome if Scooble ended up on the cover of the game. He's obviously done a good job promoting himself, branding himself, not in like an egotistical way. Like he's remained very authentic through it, from what I can tell. So I think it'd be cool if Scooble ends up on the cover. We'll see on that one.
I with respect to Lindor and Soto, I would actually be kind of upset if after like an historic collapse that resulted in no postseason, and a team that is in straight turmoil in terms of like being in the news for all the wrong reasons, you get somebody on from that squad. The East Coast bias thing could not be clear if that's the case. So that's all I'll say about that. All right, moving
Has a
on to
Boris? When's
something.
the last time a Boris client was on the cover of MLB The Show?
Uh,
That's my question.
Harper.
That's probably
Harper.
Harper, which was 2019. Vlad Jr.'s not. Jazz Chisholm, I'm not sure. I don't think so. Shohei, no. Tatis? Is Tatis? I don't know. Baez, no. Harper, yes. Soto and Skubal are both Boris clients. Does Boris like to engage with Sony? Maybe that's the real question here.
Tatis is not, and
Francisco
uh,
Lindor is not a Boris client.
so maybe there's something there. Maybe you just uncovered something. That's why we pay you the big bucks, Cody. Uh, I did find this interesting. So I like looking at team over unders, like, and kind of tracking how they move and how the market moves around them when when transactions are made, when Bregman signs with whoever he signs with, like there could be some movement in the markets. But as of early January, as of January 6th, the Tigers have at least one available win total over under that I did want to just mention because I did find it interesting. So the Tigers have this is according to Bet Online. The Tigers have the highest win total over under number put out there at 86.5. And I'll read the rest of the
Hmm.
division. Royals 81.5, Guardians 80.5, Twins 71.5, White Sox 63.5. So again, just to reiterate, that's a 5-game gap from this one odds maker between the Tigers in first place and second place Royals in terms of just an over under number to put out there. And we're not giving any. Just want to be clear, we're not giving any advice, any gambling advice. But I did want to mention it because I thought it was interesting that the Tigers were number one and B were so clearly number one on this list that like it makes you think the market expects them to have a distinct possibility of comfortably winning that division. So I just thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
that's surprising to me, especially given kind of other stuff we've seen out there since the end of last season. I kind of would have expected, I don't know, Tigers, Royals, both there at 84, Guardians 82, maybe even the Twins a little higher, just kind of all jumbled in the middle. That makes me wonder if the books know something.
Yeah, maybe they do, but yeah, well, I like to bring that up. So like the next time there's any sort of movement, I'll make note of it because I do think it is interesting. They're not in the interest of losing money now, the book. So I'll just read a couple interesting ones from the American League. Not going to go through them all, but the Red Sox are 87.5. The Yankees lead that division at 93.5. Seattle 90.5. Houston 84.5. So that's obviously a gap there too. The Texas Rangers, the perfect 83.5 number, just a hair above 500 there. So a largely competitive AL Central. It's like what we expect. We expect it to be like the Tigers have a good chance of winning that division, but there's going to be some jumbling. But again, a bigger gap than I thought. Toronto 91.5, just two back of the Blue Jays. So just wanted to make note of that. Any other numbers come up, we'll make note of and uh, and look at other projections as we get closer to spring training. All right, it is the new year, Cody. I hope everybody had a happy and healthy and safe New Year's and college football watching experience and has their teams have survived the portal and all the drama that goes into that. But it did get me thinking. If I had a New Year's resolution for the Tigers, like what would it be? And there's like a couple ways to attack this. One, it was like, do you want to do like a lot of like small ones, like do better at this, improve
Yeah.
this area? It is it transactional? Is it just sign Tarik Skubal? Is it trade Tarik Skubal? Is it all these things? I decided to go broad. Like I want like my New Year's resolution for the Tigers is to form your identity that you're really going to have as an organization moving forward. And could you say that every year? Maybe, but this is the most opportune and I would argue kind of vital time to do that with the aforementioned Tarik Skubal situation, with the fact that you're back-to-back years, Game 5 in the ALDS, and you, as we just said, you're in a very winnable division. Winning the division wouldn't be a bad resolution either, mind you. But I do think the Tigers on the field are pretty firm in like what they believe their identity is: pitching chaos, matchups, the pinch hitting, use of the all 25 for 27, all that stuff. But I think organizationally, this is the opportunity to really like cement your identity because you have young players that are either knocking on the door or going to have to be right there. You have to prove that you can develop guys that go from here to here, and then probably the hardest step here. The third level there, like guys like Riley, guys like Carey, even Torkelson to a certain extent, and Are you going to be a team that just tries to get these guys young and puts them, ships them out for the highest return on investment? Are you going to relatively go for it every year without tripping up your future? Or are you going to be cheap? We all, or are you going to be really really expensive? We can probably rule that one out. But like whatever move is made will form the identity. So I want a properly formed organizational identity in the year 2026, Cody. So that's my resolution for the
Hmm.
Tigers.
Well, that's certainly a good one. I worry they're telling you their identity right now and the way they've handled the trade deadline, this offseason, the Skubal situation, which is that their identity is no, it is a firm identity. They've shown through their actions so far. It's letting it ride. Definitely being a developmental based organization, all about player development. They're not totally being small market, the Guardians, Rays, Brewers, they're not trading guys at peak value. Um, but they're certainly not going aggressive to spend either. It's not quite thread the needle because I think thread the needle can involve like adding and subtracting, but it's totally just letting things ride, letting things develop, really doubling down on your player development. I think so far they have a pretty firm identity. I guess we'll see if any of that changes as these players get a little more mature. For me, uh, my resolution here, like I think it relates to your on field identity. I think there are two things that really stand out if the Tigers are going to win the AL Central. Number one's pretty clear. It's not very unique. You got to strike out less. Tigers struck out more than all but three other teams in Major League Baseball last season. You cannot do that.
Ooh.
That is not going to work. It's not going to work. They were lucky to get in last year, despite how good they were in the first half. They can't do it. Whether you're Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson or um, other supporting cast members on this roster, they're going to have to be able to move the ball forward a little bit more. Scott Harris has been pretty clear about it. AJ Hinch has been very clear about it. And as much as I kind of understand, I don't know that I love it, but I understand why the Tigers have not tinkered with their position playing core. I have a hard time seeing how they're going to at um, strike out less often at any sort of meaningful clip. Man, they can strike out a little bit less often, but you see it in profiles of hitters all the time. It's hard. You can change swing paths, you can change approach, you can get more out of guys. It's hard to change the fundamental profile of who certain hitters are. I feel like they just have too many hitters with some swing and miss in their game. On that note, fascinating stat I read in an ESPN article. There are only five teams that have increased their run scoring in back to back years. So only five teams have scored more runs in 2024 than they did in 2023, and then more runs in 2025 than they did in 2024. The Tigers are one of those teams, which actually a sign of growth, right? They went from being pretty bad to competitive. They've had some young players already come up and improve. But to do this 3 years in a row, that stat right there tells me that is a really, really hard thing to do. And one of the reasons I'm skeptical about the offense. Now, to put a bow on this thing, the other resolution, you got to get back to your pitching identity, to being a pitching factory. Some of the bullpen stuff we talked about earlier, getting those guys to stick, getting the most out of some of your starters. There are always going to be injuries and you can't prevent it. But the Tigers were 17th in team ERA last season. That's another thing that's not going to fly. Given the offensive profiles, given the park you play in, you need to be a top 10, if not top five pitching staff, especially when you have the reigning Cy Young winner, the reigning back-to-back Cy Young winner. You have the best
Yeah.
pitcher in the game. You got to get more. I think they can do this one because I think Reese Olson's pretty good. I think Jack Flaherty can be better than he was last year. Casey Mize was solid last year. There's always going to be that part. Can Mize put it all together with a little more consistency this season? The bullpen, like, I don't know. I would like to see more swing and miss, but Vest, Finnegan, Jansen, Tyler Holton, like, you actually can feel pretty good about the main components in the bullpen. I think they can do this, but I think they got to be a top 10 pitching staff and at least strike out less if they want to be able to win the AL Central.
I like those too. I like those too. I think that um, complementary baseball. I think that if you anticipate it might be harder to score more than we did last year, you have to focus on the pitching aspect of it, or maybe even bank on it as like, well, that was our outlier. Whereas maybe the offense is a little bit more of a stable variable than in other cases, and then you throw in like all these young players, and obviously they're not all young, but all these young players and their strikeout profiles, came up in like a different organizational structure. So I'm curious, and we're going to be having to track this for years, so it won't be decided in 2026. But I'm curious how the ones who all they know is the Harris regime, how that translates to strike zone discipline, instinctual at bats, and
Well, they've
being able
drafted
to.
guys who grade out better in those areas to begin with. So that's part of this team's thinking right now. That's part of why they're not doing anything. That's part of why they believe so strongly in the next wave of players.
Yep. And as I always say, we'll see if it works out for you.
We'll
Do you
see.
guys have any? Do you guys have any New Year's resolutions for the Tigers that you would like to see happen? Big or small. You guys can comment on our YouTube page. You can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran_Steckley pod page at Tiger Territory _. You can also like us on Instagram and wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate everybody for listening as we get into the new year. And please go to tigerterritoryshop.com for all your Tiger Territory merch needs. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.